The kingdom of my divine will in the midst of creatures. Book of Heaven, Volume 30, Part 3. December 14th, 1931. One who does the divine will is carried in the arms of its immensity. Man, citadel of God. Difference between one who lives and one who does the divine will. I am always back in the divine volition. It seems to me that my little soul takes its flight within its light, to be consumed and lose my life in it. But no, while I consume myself, I rise again to new love, to new light, to new knowledge, to new strength, to new union with Jesus and with His divine will. Oh, happy resurrection that brings so much good to my soul! It seems to me that my soul, in the divine will, is always in act of dying, to receive the true life and form, little by little, the resurrection of my will in its own. Then my highest good Jesus, visiting my little soul, told me, "My daughter, our will is the prime point, and the unmovable and unshakable support of the creature. She is carried in the arms of our immensity, in such a way that, inside and outside of her, nothing vacillates, but everything is solidity and insurmountable strength. Therefore, we want nothing but our divine will to be done, so as to find in the depth of her soul our divine sacrarium, the hearth that always burns and is never extinguished, the light that forms the divine and perennial day. And since our will, when it reigns in the creature, gets rid of all that is human, it happens then that from the center of her soul she gives us divine acts, divine honors, divine prayers, and love, which possess invincible strength and insurmountable love. So much so that as you, in my will, wanted to embrace all the works of those who are in heaven, and of the creatures who are on earth, so that all might ask that the divine will be done on earth as it is in heaven, all the works remained marked by the great honor of asking that my fiat be the life of each creature, and that it may reign and dominate in them. And our divinity received the greatest honor, that all works would ask for the life, the kingdom of the divine will. No deed of grace is conceded by us, if it is not signed by the golden signature of our will. The doors of heaven do not open, but for one who wants to do our will. Our paternal knees do not adapt to take into our arms, to let her rest in our loving bosom, but one who comes as daughter of our will. Here, then, the great distinction that our Supreme Being used in creating the heavens, the sun, the earth, and so forth, from the way of creating man. In the created things, it placed an enough in a way that they can neither grow nor decrease, although it placed in them all the sumptuousness, the beauty, and magnificence of the works come out of our creative hands. On the other hand, in creating man, since we had to hold our dwelling place in him, and therefore our will dominating and operating, it did not place an enough. No, but it gave him the virtue of doing multiplicity of works, of steps, of words, but one different from the other. Our will in man would remain hampered if it did not give him the virtue of doing works ever new, not subject to doing only one work, of saying the same word, of moving his steps on one path alone. He was created by us as King of creation, because, since his Creator, the King of kings, was to dwell in him, it was right that he who formed the dwelling for our divine being would be the little king who was to dominate the very things created by us. And he himself, for love of us, was to have the power to do not just one work, but many new works, sciences, to be able to start new things, also to give honor to the one who dwelled inside of him, and who, remaining with him in intimate conversation, would teach him many beautiful things to do and say. Therefore, our love in creating man was insuperable, but so much that it was to overwhelm all centuries, to give love and ask for love, and form in him the kingdom of our divine will. We have no other aim upon creatures, nor other sacrifice, but for them to do our will. And this, in order to give man the right to be king of himself and of created things, and to be able to dwell in him with our decorum and honor, as our citadel and royal palace that belongs to us. After this, while I continued my abandonment in the divine volition, my beloved Jesus added, "My good daughter, you must know that our will has its life, its dominion, its dwelling place, its center, in our divine being. It forms one single thing with us, and our very life. From its center it emits its rays, full of its life that fills heaven and earth. Now, for one who lives in our will, her acts are formed in the center of its life, that is, in our divine being. On the other hand, one who only does our will also does good, but does not live in it. Her acts are formed in the rays which it emits from its center. There is a difference between one who could operate in the light that the sun spreads from the center of its sphere, and one who could rise into its center of light. This one would feel the consummation of her being, and the rising again of her being in that center of light, in such a ways that it would be difficult for her to detach herself from within that sphere of light. On the other hand, the others who operate in the light that fills the earth, do not feel the intense power of the light that consumes them, nor that to rise again in the same light. And even though they do good, they remain as they are. Such is the difference between one who lives and one who does my will. So for as many acts as she does in it, so many times does she rise again to divine life, and is consumed, and dies to what is human. How beautiful are these resurrections in the soul! It is enough to say that they are formed by the wisdom and mastery of the divine Maker. And this says everything. All the beauty and all the goodness that we can do in the creature. Fiat. December 21st, 1931. How a continued act is like judge, order, and sentry of the creature. Who the depositories of Jesus are. Divine fields and seas. My abandonment in the divine fiat continues. Its power imposes itself upon me, and wants me to recognize it in each act of mine as life of my act, to be able to extend with its power the new heavens of beauty, of love, to be able to recognize in my act its own act, which does not know how to do small things, but great, that must arouse the amazement of the whole of heaven, and be capable of competing with all its works. But if I do not recognize it, my act is not fit for receiving the power of the act of the divine will, and my act remains act of creature, and its power remains aside. O divine will, let it be that I may always recognize you, to be able to enclose in my act your potentiality, operating and glorifying of the works of your adorable will. Then, while I was thinking of this, my beloved Jesus made his short little visit to my poor soul, and told me, my daughter, to recognize what my will can do in the act of the creature forms the divine act in her. And in this act, as its foundation, my will places the divine beginning. And as it keeps forming, it invests it with its immutability in such a way that the creature will feel in her act a divine beginning that never shows any sign of ending, and an immutability that never changes. This is the sign that the soul has received the divine beginning into her acts. The continuation, a prolixious act, says God dwelling in her and in her acts. It says confirmation of the good, because the value, the grace, the power of a continued act is so great that it fills the little voids of intensity of love, the little weaknesses to which the human nature is subject. It can be said that a continued act or virtue is like the judge, the order, the sentry of the creature. This is why I care so much that your acts be continuous, because there is something of my own inside of them, and I would feel my act dishonored in yours. See, my daughter, my ardor of love is so great that I want everything I have done for love of creatures to be recognized. But this, for nothing else than to give. I feel a restlessness for giving. I want to form the depositories of my life, of my works, of my pains, of my tears, of everything. But these do not depart from me if they are not recognized. By not recognizing them, they prevent my step from drawing near to place in them that which with so much love I want to give. And besides, they would remain without the effects. They would be like many blind who cannot see what is around them. On the other hand, the recognizing is sight for the soul, which makes the desire and the love arise, and therefore the gratitude toward me who so much wants to give. And they jealously keep my treasure deposited in them, and in the circumstances they make use of my life as guide, of my works in order to confirm their works, of my pains as support of their pains, and of my tears in order to wash themselves if they are stained. And oh, how happy I am that they make use of me and of my works in order to help themselves. This was my purpose for coming upon earth, to remain like a little brother in their midst, and inside of them as help in their needs. As they recognize me, I do nothing other than reflect myself in them in order to seal the good that they have known, almost like sun, which, by reflecting its light over plants and flowers, communicates the substance of the sweetness and of the colors, not just apparent, but in reality. So, if you want to receive much, try to know what my will did and does in creation, and what it did in redemption. And I will be generous with you, and shall deny you nothing of what I make you know. Even more, know that if I do not stop yet acting as your teacher, to make known to you many other things that belong to me, it is because I want to keep giving you what I make you know. I would not remain content if I did not have something to give, and always new things to give to my daughter. Therefore I anxiously wait for you to set in place in your soul that which you have known, that you may retain it as your own thing. And while you set it in place, in order to help you set it, I keep caressing you, molding you, strengthening you. I expand your capacity. In some, I renew what I did in the creation of the first creature. More so, since, those being my own things that you have known and that I want to deposit in you, I do not want to trust anyone, not even yourself. I, myself, with my own creative hands, want to prepare the place and deposit them in you. And in order to keep them safe, I surround them with my love, with my strength, and with my light as guard. Therefore, be attentive. Let nothing escape you, and in this way you shall give me the field to be able to give you the most beautiful surprises. After this, my little intelligence continued to cross the interminable sea of the divine will, and my highest good Jesus added, "My daughter, we have interminable divine fields and seas. These are filled with joys, with beatitude, with enchanting beauties of every kind, and possess the virtue of making ever new joys arise, and beauties such that none of them is like another. However, in these divine seas and fields of ours, as much as there are innumerable things and beatitudes, we have no lives that palpitate. While we are life and heartbeat of everything, also of our joys, we miss the heartbeat of the creature that would palpitate in our own, and as life, fill these interminable fields and seas of ours. Now, do you want to know who brings to us her life? Not a new thing. We have so many of them. It is one who comes to live in our will. In fact, our will, overflowing from us, forms for us our divine fields and seas, filled with all possible and imaginable happinesses. And the creature comes into them as life, and we have the great contentment and the great glory that a life of ours can give us. And even though this life has come out of us, she is yet free to stay or not stay in our divine fields. And she loses. She sacrifices her human freedom, and in our will she takes the divine freedom. And as life, she lives in our fields and seas without boundaries. And oh, how beautiful it is to see this life making her way through the thick crowds of our happinesses and joys, and casting in them her seed, her grain of wheat, image of her will that forms its ear so high, but as the reality, and not just apparent, of the palpitating and operating life in our celestial field. Or like a little fish, also symbol of her will, which, as life, palpitates, swims in our sea, lives and nourishes itself, amuses itself, plays 1,000 waterworks, and amuses its creator, not as joy, but as life. There is a great difference between what our joys can give us and what a life can give us. This is why we can say, our fields are deserted, our seas are without fish, because the life of the creatures with which to fill them, so as to be able to give and receive life for life, is missing. But the time shall come when they shall be full, and we will have the contentment and the great glory that in the midst of our manifold joys there will be a multitude of lives that shall live inside of these fields, and shall give us life for life. Now you must know that these, our fields and seas, are at the disposal of those who live on earth and who want to live life in our divine will, not for those who live in heaven, because those cannot add a single comma to what they have done. These are the enjoying lives in our divine fields, not the operating lives. It can be said of them, what is done is done. But it is the operating and conquering lives from the earth that we long for, and for them to enter, while being on earth, into these fields of ours, and operate and act as conquerors in a divine manner. More so, since from the moment man sinned, he went out from inside our will, and with justice the doors of these fields of ours were closed to him. Now we want to open these, our doors, after so many centuries, to whomever wants to enter, not forcing them, but freely, to let us populate these divine fields of ours, so as to give a new form, a completely new way of life to the creature, and be able to receive from her, not works, but life in each of her acts, life formed in our own life. Hear then the reason for so much speaking about my will. The power of my creative word shall dispose them, shall give them the desire, shall change the human will. And knowing that I want to open the doors, they shall knock, and immediately I will open to them, so that I myself may be satisfied, and I may have my fortunate people that shall give me, in return for my life which I gave for them, their life, in exchange for mine. Never have I spoken without getting anything, or in vain. I spoke in creation, and my words served to form the admirable things of the whole universe. I spoke in redemption, and my word, my gospel, serves as guide to my church, as light, as support. It can be said that my word is the substance and the life palpitating in the womb of my church. Now, if I have spoken, and I still speak about my divine will, it shall not be in vain. No, but I shall have the admirable effects and the life of my will known, operating, and palpitating in the midst of creatures. Therefore let me do, and I will dispose things in a way that my word shall not be a dead word, but alive, which will give life with all its admirable effects. More so, since these celestial fields and seas of ours shall act as mothers to the fortunate souls who would want to live in them. They will educate them in a divine manner. They will nourish them with delicious foods taken from the celestial table, and shall raise them in a noble way and holy, such that in all their acts, steps, and words, it will appear, written in clear notes, they are similar to their Creator. God will hear the melody of His voice in their word, His power in their works, the sweet motion of his steps that runs after everyone, for he wants them with himself in their steps. And as though enraptured, he will say, "Who is it that is like me? Who can imitate my sweet, harmonious, powerful voice, as to be able to shake heaven and earth? Who possesses such strength as to capture me into her works, to make me operate together with her? Who is it? Who is it?" Ah, it is one who lives in our divine fields. It is right that she be like us in everything, as much as it is possible for creature. She is our daughter, and that's enough. Let us allow her to imitate us, to be like us. She shall be our glory of our creative work, the longed-for one of her celestial Father. These souls will form the new hierarchy of the celestial fatherland, where there is a place reserved for them, which to no one else is it given to occupy. Fiat. You have reached the end of the Book of Heaven, Volume 30, Part 3. Fiat.